Easthampton's health department issuing a public health advisory today for Rubber Thread Pond. Potentially harmful cyanobacteria, more commonly known as blue-green algae, has been detected in the water. Officials are advising people not to swim in the pond, which is located behind the Payson Avenue parking lot. Also, keep pets from playing in the water or drinking the water. Both people and animals should avoid contact with the algae, even if it's on shore. It can cause skin and eye irritation, as well as gastrointestinal problems if ingested.